Tony, cybercriminals are getting more sophisticated in terms of their attacks online. What are some of the ways that they are scamming users on the internet?
Well, so cybercrime does evolve, you're correct, and it evolves in the same way things evolve in other businesses. I mean, if we think of criminals running a business. But one way we've seen them evolve recently is you've probably seen the performance scams of historically where they turn around and tell you there's something wrong with your machine and it could perform better and click here to get more performance or to do something to your device. Well, they've switched that up. And what they've realized is they're using the same infrastructure and the same delivery method, but just a different type of scam at the front, where it uses CAPTCHA. You know, when you go to a website, you see that it presents you with the picture of the school bus or the traffic lights. Now, I don't know why I can never get these right, by the way. Yeah, I can click on all those. I can click on all the squares with the traffic lights, and then it shows me a bus and says I got it wrong. Yeah, how did I do that? But what they've done is, and latterly you'll see the one that says, "Are you a robot?" or confirm you're not a robot. I don't know what a robot says to that, by the way. But it then asks you to do something else. So it's interesting because it's actually when you see a CAPTCHA, you have implicit trust, right? That CAPTCHA puts on the screen and it's nearly like they're authenticating you. I mean, they're not, but they're authenticating you're real. So you have this trust with it. Now, if it asks you to do something else, so you click on that I'm not a robot or I'm human, and if it turns around and says, right, Amber, now could you click these 3 keys on your keyboard, would you do it?
Probably, yes.
Right. And that cut and pastes malware into a script, runs in the browser, and hey presto, they're off. They're now installing malware on your device, info stealing malware or ransomware, whatever the payload is. And of course, it's a social engineering tactic because they had you in that authentication, that trust moment. You never think that the CAPTCHA is the thing that's going to actually be malicious. So there's a great that's a great example of an evolution of how cybercrime does actually progress.
What about attacks in terms of people spending more and more time on mobile devices? Because it is also true that, hey, it used to be that we would be sitting at computers and maybe paying a little bit more attention. But now a lot of people are on their phones, they're in transit, they're on tiny little screens. How are cybercriminals taking advantage of the time people are spending on mobile?
Well, the tiny little screens are super interesting. So when you think about things like deep fakes and they're moving in some of that direction for financial scams. Now, I'd say look for the flickering of the eyes, the kind of out of sync of mouth and things like that with a video. And of course, you can't see that on a small screen. It's really difficult. But one of the other interesting ones we've seen recently is something we've called kaleidoscope. Now, what that is where the cybercriminal will put up an official app, a legitimate app, into one of the official stores and then create a second variant, an evil twin variant of the app that then delivers something else. And in the case of Kaleidoscope that we saw, it was actually bombarding the user with advertising. So it's adware, which is going to be really annoying on a mobile device. Interestingly, the app looks legitimate. And the reason we've called it's an evil twin is it has the same app ID. So from the advertiser's perspective, it looks like the advertising is actually coming from the legitimate app. And therefore, they don't detect that actually this is a piece of malware that's delivering their ads onto somebody's device without permission.
That is absolutely terrifying. And I'm curious, just as people are hearing it and some of the new terms that you're mentioning, what type of information are these cybercriminals looking for? What do they plan to do with it?
Well, of course, identity theft is a big thing. If I can steal enough personal information about you, then potentially I can go and create fraud around your identity. I can steal your bank account information or your payment card information, etc. Or I might be piecing information together with other information that's already been breached. So I get a wider profile of you. Or I might be gathering enough information that I could then spear phish you in effect of, hey, Amber, I saw you went to this restaurant, or I've seen you do this, or and suddenly the spear phishing, you're gonna, that's, and give them more information, and that's the more information they will then use to make money from you.
What about people who are targets of these attacks? Because there was a point in time where typically it was an older population who often these cyber criminals went after. How is that changing?
Well, I think from a certain element, it's both. I mean, there's the older population who I think are still susceptible, but I've certainly seen younger people, because we're all they're all in a rush, and they will click a link without actually too much consideration. I think the older person clicks on it having considered it and still clicks on it. So I think there are just different demographics. And of course, potentially the older person has more to steal. They may have more bank accounts, more savings, et cetera, et cetera. So they may be more susceptible. But I don't think there's any particular demographic that doesn't have something worth stealing. The other thing to think about as well is small business owners. If you can then get into a small business, so for example, a ransomware attack on a small business can be very, very profitable for cyber criminals too.
Before we get into some of the ways that people can stay safe, you mentioned a term there that I would love you to expand just for people who are unfamiliar with it. You said the term social engineering. What exactly does that mean?
Well, take the case I just gave you with the CAPTCHA. I'm playing on your emotion. I'm playing on you socially because you think you're in the authentication. So social, or in other instances, a scammer may contact you in turn and say, "I'm from the help desk. There's something wrong with your machine." They're playing on your emotion and they're engineering the outcome of it. So they're playing on your trust element, I think, is probably the best way to view it. I mean, you often hear in business scams where they get duped with ransomware. It typically starts with social engineering. So, for example, the cyber criminal may actually physically call a help desk and ask for a password reset. I'm traveling, I'm this person, I can't get access, you really need to help me out, I've got this deal that needs to be closed, etc. They're socially engineering the person on the help desk to get them to reset the password for them, when they're not actually the person whose password it is. So it's just playing on human behavior.
What can people do to stay safe? Because it seems to me that there are more and more threats, that cyber criminals are getting more sophisticated. What can individuals do in terms of staying safe from all of these threats that exist today?
Well, firstly, be very cautious about clicking something. So if something lands in your inbox, in your email, personally, I'd always turn and say, well, go directly to a browser, log on to whatever it is that is telling you there's a message for you and look directly. Don't click the link in email. But come at everything with a zero trust viewpoint. And this is a term that's used in business about cybersecurity. But I think it's really good for consumers to take that attitude as well. Trust nothing, and then verify everything. Because if you come at every click or everything that lands in your inbox, SMS, or however it presents itself, then I think you're in a good spot to stay safe. But also make sure you've got cybersecurity software, because phishing links and some of those clicks will get picked up by cybersecurity software and blocked.
You write a lot about cybersecurity, and I know ESET does a lot of research. Where can people go to get more information?
Well, so there's two sites that we have. Our research is published on welivesecurity.com. And there's a lot of help and assistance you can get on there as well. So there's some deep research and there's some more useful research for consumers as well. And then ESET.com is where you'll find our products.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tony.
My pleasure, Amber.